circle to the left. Who can it be knocking at my door? Go away, don't come round here no more. Then start right and you roll it around. Left Alaman and weave around the ring. Can't you see that it's late at night? Swing your girl and promenade tonight.
All right, here we go. Another Square Dance Callers Talking today. Because it's nighttime over there and it's daytime here. I'm back in Australia. I've got Jaden Frigo. How are you, sir?
Very good, mate. Good to see you.
It's good to see you. We talked a little bit. I see a lot of your stuff on Facebook and that type of thing. We met, you probably don't remember this, at the
I do.
At the National Convention in Georgia. And
I remember you were emceeing the trail in afternoon session.
Yep.
And I remember speaking to you and you were expecting 4 or 5 squares, and we ended up with about 400 people in the hall. And I remember that session well.
That's great, man. I'm so happy you remember that. I didn't know if you'd remember that, but I did.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that was the first national convention I'd ever gone to. And I'd probably seen you or heard about you maybe a year or so on Facebook, because I was just really getting into calling a lot then. And then, that first session you walk up and I was like, hey, I know that guy. And so that's outstanding, man.
That was my first American national too. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. It was a really enjoyable one. I liked it because I've been to every one since. And they've all been a lot of fun. We'll talk about it later. Are you coming over for Wisconsin end of this month or no?
Unfortunately, I'm not. I've tried to get over to the last couple of nationals, and I just need to win Volato or something to get an airfare to America.
I can imagine. I imagine that's true, buddy.
No, I am back in the USA early next year. I'm feature caller for the Midwinter Festival in Oregon, so I will be getting back to the US for the first time in almost 6 years.
That's awesome.
So I'm excited to hit the road again.
That'd be great, man. And if you can remember, man, absolutely get me some kind of reminder. Send me a message or something. Of course, Oregon's a long way from me. Not as far from you, and not as far as for you. But I'd love to get out that direction. Let's start with everything. Where exactly are you?
I'm on the Mornington Peninsula, which is about an hour from Melbourne, Australia, which is the second largest city in Australia. And so we're right down at the southern. We're about as far south on mainland Australia as you can go. We have an island state called Tasmania, which is further south, which is home of a Tasmanian devil, which everybody knows. Everybody knows him. But we're about as far south in Australia as you can get on the mainland.
Now, you lived there all your life?
Yeah, I was actually born in Queensland, which is up in the far north, but lived down here all my life and very happily settled here.
That is outstanding, man. And, obviously everybody that listens to or watches this podcast knows that square dancing is all over the world. Larger in some parts, smaller in other parts. So this is really something that I really like looking into. When did you start square dancing?
I started dancing at the age of 6. I was born into square dancing. My parents did it for many years before I started. And so I was going to square dances from when I was a few weeks old, quite literally. And there's actually quite a large group of us who were all kids in square dancing together, who most of us learnt to dance. Some of us learned to dance at 6, others waited for they were 10 or 12, but and we've been friends ever since. But I learned to dance as soon as I was able to. And back then, a lot of it wasn't very popular for clubs to take on really young dancers like that. It was more sort of, why do you want someone that short coming in square dancing? But thankfully, the club let me learn, and I was really glad for the opportunity. But nowadays, there's a lot more focus on getting young people dancing. So if someone young wants to learn now, it's very open arms, which is good to see.
Absolutely. Well, so since your family kind of the ones that got you into it, did either your parents call or anything like that?
No, not at all. My parents were dancers, and I actually decided I was going to be a caller before I learned to dance. When I was about 4 years old, I was sitting watching callers in action and thinking that's what I want to do. So
Oh, okay.
I made the choice very early that I was going
Well,
to become a caller, and
that's outstanding. I mean, you started very early. We were just wanting to, and usually ask people what kind of pushes them to it. But you grew up in it at 4, 5, 6 years old when you're learning to dance. So, at what point did you actually get to go up and do something on a microphone? Do you remember that?
yeah, it was quite a few years after I first started learning to dance. And I don't know if this is popular in America, but in Australia, it used to be very popular to do amateur callers nights where anybody in the club who wanted to have a go at calling, pick up a record. Of course, in those days it was easier because you just loaned them a record. And yeah, I the club I was dancing at did that, so I got up and had a go. And from there I just kept going.
Wow, that's out. About how old were you, do you think?
Um, I was, I should know this, but I've actually gone blank. I was 8 when I first picked up a microphone.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And, I remember, and a lot of people do, some don't. Do you remember the first singing call you did?
Yeah, very, very much so. It's a song it's actually an Australian song, which is called Home Amongst the Gum Trees.
Oh, months ago. Okay.
And it's not a song which is particularly well known outside of Australia, but it's on Seven Seas label. And yeah, I learned to sing that song in school, so it made sense to pick it up as a square dance.
Absolutely. That's great. Well, we all know the work that goes into calling, what it takes to get into choreography and all that. Who did you have for mentors and teachers or that type of thing?
Well, I was very lucky that I had a lot of mentors. Graham Jameson was the caller who I learnt to dance with and whom I started calling with. And Frank Kennedy, who was a veteran caller who retired quite a few years ago. He took me under his ring, and I was officially his trainee for quite a number of years. Then we had a caller called Peter Humphreys, who's a very well-known caller down here in Melbourne, who gave me a lot of help and advice. And nowadays, Peter dances and calls at my club, so it's been a nice symmetry there.
Nice, yeah.
And then as I started to get more active, I started to travel to events interstate. And so I met some big name callers, people like Steve Turner, who I think's already been interviewed.
Yeah, I talked to Steve.
Barry Ronson, Brian Hotchkiss, some of the big name Australian callers whom I met, and were all wonderful supports over the years. So I was very fortunate that I had no shortage of callers to turn to and ask for ideas and help, and also getting opportunities from. I think as callers, not just who teaches you to call, it's who gives you opportunities to get up at major events and call. And all of those guys I've mentioned all got me onto the program at large events. And actually, I have a good memory of Brian Hotchkiss, who's a very well-known caller. I went to his dance. I was very, very, very new to calling, and I'd never called outside my home club to 2 or 3 squares. And I was at his club's birthday, and he had something like 25 squares on the floor. And he just walks up to me and says, Jaden, you're calling in the next tip. And I didn't have a music on me. But just for pushing from those guys to push me along is why I'm here today doing what I do. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, the support systems are awesome, and when you have a good one, like it sounds like you did, that's outstanding. And also the availability to get put up on a stage or get put up on a microphone, because we don't always have stages, and it's detrimental for me. I'm 5'6", so it's a little tough when my number one couple's a 6-foot man. I'm like, oh well, I'm never gonna see over that guy. But yeah, when somebody says, hey man, just go grab the microphone and do something, I mean, that's a huge help with all the guys that are all the callers that were helping you out. do you have any like takeaways, anything that you think about a lot just as a caller for yourself?
Yeah, actually, I think um the biggest takeaway I always kept in mind was Frank Kennedy, who was my official mentor. And Frank, who's retired now, was a wonderful entertainer. He, in his own words, was not the best choreographer in the world, but he was a wonderful entertainer. And he always used to tell me that it doesn't matter if, as a caller, you're a challenging caller or an easy caller, if you're calling to young dancers, old dancers, advanced dancers, whatever. Your job is a very simple one. Get up and ensure that people leave having enjoyed themselves.
Okay.
And if they've done that, then you've done your job. And that's, I think sometimes as callers, we can get very caught up in, especially nowadays, in being too technical or whatever else. But ultimately, our job is a very, very simple one.
Yep.
Send the dancers home happy, and we've done our job for the night. So that's something I've always, and honestly, it's still something which, before I call any dance, I actually stop and remind myself just before I start calling, is my job is sending these people home happy tonight.
That is
And
great.
I think it's a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. That's a great takeaway, man. And it is. We are, when bottom line, whether you're a great singer, a great choreographer, both, whatever you're doing, as long as they're having a good time, you know, because it's, especially with the age groups that we deal with for the most part now. I don't know, you might have some younger dancers in Australia with you. You know, it's hit or miss with the younger ones here. So you really want to, you know, you only got a small crowd sometimes. So you want them to want to come back. And, you know, now, how often are you calling? Do you call weekly, or do you have clubs? How do you work it over there?
I'm a full-time caller. I have been ever since I finished high school.
Wow, okay.
So it's been a long time of full-time calling now. Presently, I run 4 to 5 groups a week at home. And at one stage during 2017-18, I was doing 9 to 10 sessions a week. That backed off a little bit over COVID. It hasn't quite fully kicked on, but we're actually starting. My partner and I are starting some new groups in the spring, which for us is September, because our seasons are back to front to you guys.
Right. Okay.
So, or as I like to say, your seasons are back to front to ours. But you know, that's as popular as saying that's as popular as saying you guys drive on the wrong side of the road. So let's not go there. But but in all seriousness, we're going to launch a new group in the spring, and hopefully in a new area, and hopefully get some quite a few groups sprouting from that. So but yeah, and you got to remember, in Australia, we don't have a huge number of special weekends and events nowadays.
Okay.
So we actually run 2 to 3 annual weekend events ourselves. But there's probably only maybe 15 to 20 special weekend events across the country nowadays. So it's not, as a full-time caller, my focus is my home groups, and you do a bit of traveling.
Yeah.
And pre-COVID, I was traveling a lot to America and Europe. I did quite a few overseas trips. That hasn't really kicked on yet, although, as I said, I am returning to America and Europe December, January coming up. So I'm looking forward to packing the suitcase again.
Outstanding.
And but yeah, I think, but also in Australia, and something which is quite relevant to what you were saying before as well about getting exposure as a caller, is whereas in America, most clubs are committee-run clubs and hire callers. In Australia, most of our clubs are caller-run.
Okay.
We have very few committee-run clubs in Australia. Most of our clubs, caller and their partner will start the club and run the club. And so, yeah, it's a bit of a different setup, which it does make it easier as a caller that if you want opportunities to call, well, you go and start your own club. And that's what I've always, and as I said, we've started a lot of new groups over the years in different areas, and which is important. I think getting out to different areas is very important, because we want to try and find the potential square dancers everywhere we can.
Brother, that is a lot going on. That's awesome. I didn't know that it was that way. Because here, and I don't know what the percentage numbers are, it's all dancer run, basically, with the club president and treasurer and all that stuff, and they hire you. Now, we do have some legit caller run clubs, and like Ted Lazat, just popped top of my head. He's got a really good one up there where he is, and I know that he was over there a while back over in Australia, I believe.
Yes, he called weekends with me. We've had a lot of international callers come through and call for us over the years. So yes, Ted and Shelley came down in 2018. No, 2019. 2019. So yep.
Well, what was I going to ask you on that? So with you've come over to the States, you've done some European tours and all that. What's some of the floors that stand out to you, some venues that you really enjoyed, whether it be the floor, the dancers, anything like that?
I see some of the venues that stand out to me in Europe were the fact that I've caught in a lot of halls in Europe that did not feel like square dance halls. Okay. My first ever dance in Germany was calling at a dance in Stuttgart, and it was a beautiful hall, but from the outside it looked like just a block of townhouses or apartments, and it just happened to be that there was a dance hall with 10-foot ceilings.
Wow.
And just in the middle of a residential area. It was just such a shock to walk in and find a hall for 20 sets there. And I've called in Europe, and I've called in a foyer of a gymnasium and all sorts of things. I love that a lot of the clubs I've called for in Europe will just find any room they can and have a dance there.
That's what you got to do sometimes, unfortunately. I mean, yeah. Of course, that's really nice places.
And I had in the USA, I've called at the Hayloft up in Massachusetts, which was a beautiful venue. I really enjoyed calling up there. I called it. I visited Tech Squares, Ted Lazot's club, which was a very unique experience going to a square dance at a university like that. That was really something unique, which still sticks in my mind. And actually, casting my mind back, actually, the other venue in America which stands out to me was when I was staying with Jet and Sylvia Roberts down in Alabama. We went to a club there at Gunnersville, which was overlooking the lake, which was an absolutely beautiful. It's probably the best scene we've ever seen at a square dance hall. That was stunning.
That's awesome. Okay.
And I've called at some very interesting halls in Australia as well. I think same as America, in Australia, especially in the country areas, there's been some very creative venues for halls. We've used old barns, and actually what was popular in Australia was, which I'm not sure if this term will mean much to an American, is a wool shed. The place where they go and shear the sheep. And most of the wool sheds had wooden floors, so or they put them down. And so I've called in quite a few wool sheds all over Australia.
Great.
Including one with wool and shearing equipment and everything. It was just make some room and dance. It was I think my most memorable venues are the ones in the country areas.
Okay.
They were
yeah, I mean, when you think about square dancing, and I don't know in Australia, but here it's thought of as, barns and country and that type of stuff. And it is traditionally it is. But yeah, like you said, I do more in gymnasiums and recreation centers than I do in barns anymore.
Absolutely.
But yeah, they're shearing sheep over there. It's outstanding. I mean, I guess it's got to be good for the sound. With you got the padding and all that with the wool. Great. That's awesome. Oh man. I meant to ask you this earlier. So what level do you dance to? What level do you call to?
I dance proficiently to C1. I've danced very dodgily in the past to C3A, with a lot of pushing and pulling, but I call through to C1, C2, although in saying that we don't have any challenge level dancing really in Australia. In Australia, we tend to sort of cut off at A2, so I really only call challenge when I'm overseas. So yeah, basically up to A2, I'd say, and also Q rounds, Q and teach round dancing as well.
Okay.
There's quite a few callers in Australia who call and Q. It's quite a commonality over here. Again, because if you're running a caller run club and you want to put rounds on, well, you need to either have a Q dancing with you, or you need to do them yourself. So,
okay. Now, have you done that the whole time, also queuing, or is that something you picked up later?
I started queuing only a couple of years after I started calling. I've been queuing for a long time now, and that was again my mentor Frank Kennedy, who called and queued. He encouraged me very early on. Frank was a big advocate of being versatile, but being able to queue a few rounds, or from early on being able to get up and call a plus bracket back when I was only calling mainstream, or being able to do something like a 6-couple square if there was 6 couples in the hall and all that sort of thing. Frank always pushed me to have all those little things up your sleeve, so no matter what the situation as a caller, you're prepared.
Awesome. Okay.
So,
and since you do, I mean, you dance up to C1 and the C3A on occasion.
yes.
And I ask everybody, and I actually got a comment last week because I didn't ask this. Do you have a favorite get out, or do you just cite it from there? How do you go about it?
Favorite get out? Oh, no, I utilize a lot of get outs and pre-memorized choreography like that.
Okay.
So citing is a good starting point, but I think if you want to look well polished as a caller, you need to have some good material up your sleeve.
Yep.
I probably my favorite get out is actually just the simple partner line, always extend, make a wave, swing through, center boy trade, center boy run, new center boy hinge, everybody Alaman left. It's just a nice surprise get out.
Yep.
And I really like material which is interesting, a little bit different, but not challenging, that's going to break down dancers.
Yep.
I think one of the weak point, I think something which is in general we can all improve as callers, is our ability to be interesting and keep things different, but not challenging and break squares down and be mentally taxing. There's a big difference between interesting and challenging. And I was fortunate that a lot of our leading Australian callers are, in my opinion, absolute masters at being interesting, variety, but not too hard. And so I had some very good mentors to learn from in that regard.
I was going to ask you that earlier. With being a full-time caller and calling as often as you do, what is your process to keeping it fresh? I mean, I know you have different clubs. You might do a mainstream plus and then an A. So there's a way of breaking it up a little. But when you have the same dancers 2 or 3 times a week, I'm imagining.
Yes.
How do you manage your music and your choreography to keep it fresh?
Musically, I just tend to try and I'd say music, you just tend to rotate your music and try and introduce some new stuff every week or two. And it's nice to be able to come along to club at the start of a week and have a couple of new songs you brought over the weekend and give them a bit of airtime. And the choreographically is a very challenging one. It's being a traveling caller is not that hard because you get a different audience every week. Being a home caller where you're calling, as you said, to the same people multiple times, I think it's about, as a caller, not trying to be too fancy at your home groups. I think some callers try and call their home club nights the way they call a weekend or a Saturday night dance. And if you try and be too fancy like that, then you end up running out of material very quickly and then you become repetitive.
Yeah.
So I think at home clubs, you can have a little bit of wow factor on top, but in general, you need to focus on having good, smooth, interesting dancing. And just looking at each week, picking out a couple of calls and just looking at it, working with them, saying we're going to do some interesting variations on this or that. But ultimately speaking, I think it's important. While it's all good to have music choreographically with your home groups, if you work it socially and have a good social and good rapport with the floor, then you keep them interested, and that's your starting point. And they can really have some good fun with music and choreo, etc.
for the longest, for the first few years, I was just traveling. Anybody who would hire me, I would go. You know, so you can get 7, 8 strong singing calls for you, and your patter, you know, and I just do mainstream and plus. And you can run the same thing. I can dance. I can call a dance on Friday night, and then Saturday night be 85 miles away, and you do the same exact thing, because there might be one dancer or 2 dancers that were at my dance the night before. Probably not. But since then, I've gotten a club. I've been calling for a club and I call twice a month to them. And even then, you know, I've got to go back and figure out the music I haven't done. And I've got a lot of music, but yeah, you've got to change it up. It just drives me crazy. Sometimes I'll go to some place and it's the same singing calls over and over. I'm like, come on, you know, and I'm a caller. And the dancers I know have to get tired of it, because I don't dance to it every week. Well, that's fantastic, man, to have that kind of variety and approach to it, especially being a full-time. That's got to be tough sometimes to think, hey, what am I going to do different tonight?
But I think also, but I mean, I'm not really a planning caller compared to a lot of guys I know. I really, I will jot down some ideas in the afternoon about what I might want to focus on. But in general, you play it by ear. And I think that actually is good for keeping it varied as well. As you play it by ear, then you can just get a feel for who's there that night. And I've often made the comment that sometimes the dancers set the program, because if you see a couple of mistakes in the first tip, you're like, well, I know what I'm going to workshop tonight. So I've not told my dancers in the first tip, you can set the program for the whole night.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's just like the basic story. No matter what plan you have going in, it's probably going to change in the first couple of minutes.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And that's the key, I think, to presenting a good program, is the flexibility and playing by ear.
Let's see. I don't know if I asked you this or not, but also with the levels that you call to and dance to, do you have a favorite call that you just like to call?
I wouldn't say I've got a handful. I mean, I like utilizing some of the calls, especially at mainstream, which I think are underused. I like using, say, spin chain through a lot, because most places you go, you barely ever hear it. I actually really like working the Alaman Fars as well, because again, the Alaman Fars have been almost disregarded. And the handful of people that use them are basically just using very, very simple use. I mean, the Alaman Fars, you start to get into wrong way Fars and all sorts of things. You can have so much variety in there. So I just like to, I'd say my favorite calls are the ones that are not done that much, because you can really make things interesting just by using them, let alone workshopping them.
Right. Outstanding. Yeah, agreed. Even over here, spin chain through, unless you're doing lessons, you rarely hear it. And after lessons, you don't. On occasion, you know, and I do on occasion, at least once a month with my club, I will run a bunch of spin chain throughs, you know, and I like to throw it in during plus, because then they start trying to exchange gears and all that stuff. I'm like, what are you doing? So yeah, that's a lot of fun there. I was talking to somebody just last week. The other one you never hear is spin chain the gears. You always hear spin chain exchange, but it's rare. So you drop that in, and it's fun. If the dancers know you and they all know you, you can have fun with them. You know, I'm not going to walk into a club of complete strangers that I've never seen. I'm not going to stroll into a national convention and just start dropping spin chain throughs right in my first tip, you know, because it's you know, you feel the floor out, and that first tip, especially on a club dance, that first tip kind of tells you what you're going to do the rest of the night.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that first tip. I did a caller seminar quite a few years ago now, and we actually spent an entire 2-hour session talking about the first tip, because as a caller, you get that first tip right, all the very little elements to it, and you set up a successful dance. And I've seen so many callers, including, you know, excellent callers, who get the first tip wrong. Primarily, I've often said, if you can ensure that you don't have any breakdowns in the first tip, then you are setting the floor up for success because people start to feel good about themselves. All it takes is a couple of breakdowns in the first tip and dancer's confidence has dropped and you won't get it back.
Yeah.
But yet the number, I just think, if you get the first tip right, then you'll set yourself up for success.
Yeah. Because there is a confidence level that once they trust you, that you know what you're doing or the direction you're going, there's a lot more success there. You know, when you get the one, the confidence, and it's in every realm of life. If you don't put off some kind of confidence in your ability, whether you're a brand new caller or not, go up there and think you're the best one in the room. You're not.
Agree.
You know, sometimes, but you know, you have to put off that way somebody has confidence in you and they want to dance to you.
Yeah. And I think I have a discussion with a new caller a number of years ago now who said to me, I saw you do something at a dance and everybody did it correctly. I got up and called it a my dance and nobody did it. I said, well, problem is, as a new caller, you need to, as you said, you need to exude that confidence. You need to basically tell the dancers, of course, this is going to work. Have that confidence. Whereas if you get up there sounding like you're about to have a nervous breakdown, well, odds are the dancers are not going to have too much faith that it's going to work. But it's saying actually as a caller, it's amazing how, and I've found this over the years myself, if you're traveling to a new area, you've never called for this group before, if you, during the first tip, make a couple of mistakes, dancers start to think, gee, this guy isn't very good.
Yep.
But if by the third or fourth tip, you make a couple of mistakes, having called one up to them, they have a laugh with you. They appreciate you making a mistake because they like to see the caller occasionally get it wrong themselves.
Yep.
But it's just those early impressions. And I think it's also, especially with a group I've never called to before, in the first couple of tips, throw in a couple of interesting little get outs or resolves or something, just something, a little bit of wow factor, just to get their interest. If you get their interest and show them that you know what you're doing and that you have some tricks up your sleeve, then they're engaged. That's a real trick. You
can see that when you go to, whether it be a convention or somebody comes to town near you, the callers that have that ability. And I talk about it all the time, the Tony Oxendine's in this area. You know, if he comes out, everybody from miles and miles and miles are coming because they know what he can do. You know, and then you have another caller with might be as good, but just not as entertaining. Dancers aren't going to come out every time. So yeah, you want the tricks, you want the surprise get outs, and if you can do it early on, man, that's awesome.
Well, I think I've always said that what separates the good callers from the great callers is actually not ability, because 90% of callers have similar choreographic knowledge, similar choreographic ability, and often have equally good singing voices. But those are not the factors which define whether you're a great caller. What defines a great caller is how you use what you have. How you use the choreo you have, the voice you have, all those little things with judgment and all those little factors. That's what creates a great caller. I think too many callers who want to elevate themselves focus too much on, say, writing for new choreo or learning more choreo. Odds are, if you're already a good caller, your choreo is probably fine. It's a matter of how you sell it.
Yep, how you sell it. Like that.
And that's something which I've heard Tony O talk about a lot, is it's how you sell the stuff you have is the secret to success.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, brother, I wish you were here so I could see you more and actually dance to you some. It sounds like a ton of fun, and I don't know if I'll ever get over to Australia. At some point, I'd like to. We'll see. I can retire from my regular work at some point and get a little traveling under my belt. But with more about you, so thinking of that, what type of music do you like? Let's get out of square dance for just a second. What type of music do you listen to, not square dance?
I try and listen to a wide variety to try and for a young person, I'm not up to date with modern music at all. And as a lot of people remind me, so I try and I'm trying to listen to some more newer music to keep up to date. But I think partly being a caller, being exposed to all sorts of types of music, my Spotify recommended list is just a bizarre cross section of every genre you can imagine. But at heart, I'm a country music fan.
Okay.
At the root of it, I'm definitely a country guy. But in saying that, I have learned to appreciate most genres and eras as well. So,
well, with that, what are some of your favorite singing calls? Do you have any?
A lot of my, I'd say a lot of my favorites are the old favorites I've been doing for a long time, and I still get requested to do at Square Dancers, and that's at my club we do a favorite singing calls night every couple of years to find out which songs the dancers like the most.
Okay.
And over here, the winning ones are usually stuff like "Never Went Down to Georgia" or "Beautiful Noise." It's those classics always come out on top. So I tend to like some of those classics that I've been calling for a long time.
Mhm.
And beyond that, I actually wouldn't say I have a favorite singing call beyond that. I have probably about 100 favorites.
Sure. Okay. Yep. Especially if you've been calling as long as you have and as often as you have, it's tough because you're going to have different reasons for a favorite song, and so you're going to have a
Absolutely.
lot of them. Well, a little bit more about you. You obviously you're one of the younger, but you've been calling since hell you were 8 years old, so you've got plenty of years under your belt. What do you like to do? Not square dancing. Favorite foods, stuff like that. Something about you.
That's where I start to become a boring person because my life is far too much square dancing. But no, no, I enjoy traveling. Not just as a caller, actually. Actually, during COVID, I went on my first holiday for 10 years where I hadn't packed my calling gear in with my luggage. So it was a wonderful, wonderful change. But no, I like traveling. I like being able to go and eat out or try and socialize. Again, most of the time when socializing, it might be with square dancers, but it's not in a square dance setting.
Gotcha.
So it's actually nice. It's nice to get to know the people you call to or call with or whatever. I like sport. Well, I more watch it than participate nowadays, but I enjoy it.
Okay.
And yeah, I enjoy whether it's partner and I just go traveling or going out for dinner or whatever. It's just it's nice as a caller to get out and be normal for a night here and there.
Yeah.
We've done
And now
things.
you say sport. What is your sport over in Australia? What do you like?
Well, our big go-to sport is Australian football.
Okay.
Which Australian rules football is the official term, and it's a bizarre cross-section of rugby, gridiron, soccer, but played on a cricket oval. And yeah, it's a bizarre cross-section, but actually every American that I've shown the game to absolutely loves it.
I want to years ago, it seems like ESPN would show a lot of Australian rules football. Of course, I haven't watched ESPN for years just because I got out of, when I was younger, I followed every sport over here. And you would see that when ESPN was just starting, they had Australian rules football and every other thing on the planet.
Yes.
So I've seen it, and yeah, I enjoyed it, but it's been years and years since I've seen that. Oh, so we've talked about your process for dance and all that. What you said, when are you coming back over here? You said Oregon and all that. Tell me that again.
Yeah, I'm feature caller for the Midwinter Festival in Oregon, which is at the end of January.
Okay.
So yeah, we actually we're doing a 5-week trip. We're going to actually be in Europe for Christmas and calling some dancers over in Europe and hopefully the UK as well, and then fly across to America. And I've got a few dancers lined up in America, and yeah, it's going to be exciting.
That's awesome.
And
Well,
it's going to be good to find the passport again.
sure, absolutely. with all that flying and traveling and all that you've got coming up, I say this because you got a lot of plane time, especially coming out of Australia.
Oh yeah.
Favorite movies? What stuff of that? What do you like to watch?
Oh, I'm generally speaking, I'm generally either a comedy or a really good drama, especially historical drama.
Mm-hmm.
I'm especially a fan of historically accurate movies, whether it's war movies, something like that. I like a historical movie that's actual fact. Um, I'm not a big action or sci-fi, science fiction or anything like that. I'm not a big fan of any of those.
Okay.
I'm mostly a comedy or drama or yeah, historical stuff. And again, a lot of my favorite movies are classics from the 60s, 70s,
Okay.
and occasionally there'll be a new one come out which tickles my fancy. But
Very nice. You've got some traveling ahead, but if you could call a dance anywhere, where would it be and why?
ooh, that's a good question, actually. Actually, I can give you a really good left field answer to that. Actually,
Okay, let's go.
well, as far as I'm aware, there's been square dancing at one stage or another on 6 continents. But as far as I'm aware, nobody's ever had the chance to dance in Antarctica. So I reckon it would be the one fun bucket because I really want to go to Antarctica. So let's take a square of dances and let's have a square dance down there.
Wow. Okay.
Or heck, let's just take 7 dances and I'll teach a penguin. I don't care. But
Nothing wrong with that. That's a great
but
idea.
but,
Oh,
but beyond that, I'd probably say, look, I love calling the USA. I've loved calling at nationals over there in front of such big audiences. I love calling in Europe. But at the same time, there's a nice familiarity to calling in Australia, and to be honest, calling just to my home club.
sure.
And you know, I've always said I've never had a bad night calling. I've always enjoyed it, and I enjoy traveling and meeting new people. And the challenge of calling to a group you never met before is always really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I always love coming back to my home groups that I know and love and calling them as well. So I really, you know, picking a favorite dance to call was like picking your favorite child. You just can't do it.
Sure. I got you. I got you. We didn't talk about this, and but as long as you've been calling and with the callers you know and the caller schools and stuff you've been a part, do you ever think about going into the caller coaching or anything?
Yeah, I've presented. I've been on staff at a few caller schools and quite a few seminars,
Okay.
and I did a few Zoom seminars in that over COVID. The biggest, it's quite challenging in Australia getting hours up at caller coaching because we don't have really any caller schools here. Because while I'm in Australia, Australia is about the same size as the USA, but we have a population of 25 million people. So we're a very spaced out
Yeah.
country. In the case of here in Melbourne, if you go west of where we live, then you'll find a couple of square dance clubs about 6 hours away near the border with the next state, South Australia. Then you got another 5 hours to get to Adelaide to the next lot of dancers. If you're in Adelaide, then you're talking about 3 or 4 days driving west till you find the next big city of Perth where the next square dancers are, and you start to get the picture. We are very spread out. So to do a callers school is very challenging when there's sort of pockets of callers 10 hours or more away.
Okay.
So it's we've got quite a few callers in Australia that are, I think, excellent caller educators. But unfortunately, it's just very hard in Australia to get a lot of caller coaching experience. But more so here, I think our role a lot of the time is one-on-one coaching and working with whichever new callers come through.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had the great pleasure of doing that. And I absolutely love working with new callers and just seeing them get up there and put into action what you've taught them is just a really proud moment.
Sure.
And I think as callers, whether we're new callers or experienced, we owe it to the activity to always be looking for, the next caller.
Yep. Yep.
And
I never thought about it, but this last CALLERLAB, they really put out the word to try and get more callers. If you get
Mm.
more callers, then you're going to especially younger callers, you're going to recruit more dancers because they have
Correct.
friends, and that's how you pull them in. And I never thought of it that way until last year, and it makes 100%. It makes sense. I just never thought of it that way. So with as long as you've been calling on your full-time call, what advice do you have for callers, whether they be somebody who's thinking about it or somebody who's got 20 years of experience?
I would say first and foremost, when you're learning to call, be creative with giving yourself opportunities. When I was learning to call, we would invite 8 or 10 friends around to our house and dance a set in our living room just for, say, getting practice and stuff like that. As a caller, if you want to get somewhere and really learn and develop, you need to be hands-on and grab opportunities. And I mean creating them. My advice would be, especially, and I actually would apply this especially to callers in Europe and America, where most clubs are committee run, is consider taking on the challenge of a caller run club. Just find yourself a hall and advertise. And the other biggest piece of advice I give people, and this is from my own experience, as well, is call to your abilities. Don't try and be too fancy too early on. I'd say when I was a new caller, I was trying to be a bit too fancy without having the strong knowledge. I remember I got told years ago, and I actually really like it, is you can look at square dance call the same way you look at an Easter egg. You can have hollow Easter eggs or solid ones.
Okay.
On the outside, they're the same. It's when you get into them that you see the difference. The same with callers. I think you can be a caller who looks good on the outside, but you got no depth in your knowledge, or you can be a caller that has that really good. And I would say probably as a caller, just know your abilities and work with them. Don't overestimate, because if you know as a caller that you've got a weak spot with something, then you can work to cover that weak spot.
Gotcha.
But if you're not aware of your own calling ability, then you can't do that. So I think be very, very aware of your ability. Don't overestimate and don't underestimate. You don't want to say to yourself, oh, I can't sing when you can, or my choreo is terrible when it's great.
Yeah.
It's got to be realistic. And it's funny, I've often said most callers I've met either overestimate their abilities significantly or underestimate.
Yeah.
There's not that many callers I know who I'd say have an absolutely perfect read on exactly where they're at.
Yeah.
And and I'd also say to any caller coming through is focus your energy on getting new people into activity.
Yeah.
Because if every new, focus on getting new dancers in, and that's how you build a club, that's how you build a supporter base, that's how you build yourself as a caller.
Jaden, that's awesome, buddy. Before we get going, because we're coming up on about 45 minutes to an hour. Before we get going, what's your website? What's your social media stuff and that, so people can actually keep up with you that aren't in Australia?
I don't have a Facebook page as a calling page. I only have a Facebook profile, but I should actually start myself a Facebook page. I've seen quite a few guys do that now, and it's actually a good idea. My website, if you go and Google my club, Australiana Dancers.
What is it now? Australia what?
Australiana. Australiana.
Okay.
Dancers. I've got a page on there, and actually I'm just updating the website at the moment, so which is going to look really nice. And I've got my profile on cedar.net and all that.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to, after a few years of being stuck in Australia, I'm looking forward to getting back over to the States and Europe and reconnecting with a lot of friends and making some new ones. It's exciting.
Well, certainly looking forward to at some point running into you, or whether it be on the road. Now, when you come
Absolutely.
over and you go to Oregon and all that, do you have any plans for the East Coast, toward Alabama, Georgia, anything like that in the near future, you think?
I don't know yet. There's a couple of things in the pipeline, but nothing solid yet. But a couple of things in the pipeline that I'm looking at. So
I know uh, Steve Turner is coming over into this year. He's doing the Ken
yes,
Ratusi Northeast School again.
yes.
I'm trying to figure out a way to get up there. I don't think I can this year as much as I would love to, because that is a fan. I went there 2 years ago, I think, for the school, and that's a phenomenal. You were talking about the barn and all. It's a great
Yeah.
venue.
I was at Ken's Callers School in 2017, and it was a great experience. Highly recommend it to all callers.
Absolutely. Well, Jaden, anything else you want to talk about, buddy?
Well, I was just going to actually throw in there that I'm actually the other thing which you said earlier about what advice I give to callers, and the other thought I actually have, and this is actually more so to experienced callers as well, mind you, is I think the biggest mistake we make as callers, of course, because as you know, as callers, we're the leaders in the activity. And the mistake we make a lot of the time is we don't paint a very positive picture of the activity because, of course, we all know the activity might not be as big as it was 20 years ago or whatever. But I think we get mired in negativity a lot. We talk about the good old days too much when, well, just focus on the now.
Yeah.
I don't look at square dancing as, well, we have less dancers than we did 20 years ago. We have the number of dancers that we have now that assisted, and we work with what we have. And I think if you're a new caller coming into square dancing, you would not be that eager to continue if you heard a lot of the comments from a lot of the senior people in activity. I think there's a lot of negativity, a lot of just I see this on a lot of the Facebook pages. I think it's really sad how much negativity there is as far as the decline in square dancing. We have a great activity. It might not be as big as it was. We might not have as stronger dancers as we'd like or anything, but we have a great activity. We have probably the best activity in the world, in my opinion. And if we focus on that and we look at it positively, a positive attitude sets us up for success. A negative attitude is going to see us fail. So I really like that positivity. And I'm excited with obviously what is talk of the town is all over what I think now is the proposal.
Yep.
And I'm excited by that. I'm excited by the prospect there. I think for a while, we've had this sort of, I think the idea of something like that has been talked about for a long time without anybody actually figuring out how it would look.
Yeah.
And I think right now, looking around the world, one of the great things of square dancing is the fact that you can go anywhere in the world and square dance.
Yeah.
But I think with the fact that different parts of the world are not using different lists, but using a different version of the list, you might have SSD in one area or basic in another or mainstream or whatever. I think just unifying all that and bringing it back together is really exciting. So I hope to see a lot of positivity on that, because I think that if that proposal gets up and goes through, I think that can really set us up for future success. I really, really do.
That's outstanding, Jade. Brother, you are an absolute leader in this square dance calling that we love, and you're in Australia, so we don't get to see you or hear you as much over here. But you've got a great attitude toward it, man, and I would love to see what you got going on over in Australia at some point. It sounds like you really got a handle on it. And man, I appreciate you doing this. Again, when you get over here to the States, I'd love to hear from you. I don't know if I could get out to Oregon, but if you travel anywhere else, we might be able to match up somewhere.
That'd be good.
Would be outstanding. Man, I appreciate the time. It is a pleasure. Don't get to see you that often. And just keep doing what you're doing, man, and I look forward to seeing more from you.
Thank you, mate. Good to talk to you tonight. And you do a great thing here with these podcasts. It's really interesting listening to all these interviews, and
thanks.
I greatly enjoyed them. So I think it's been a pleasure to catch up, and I'm sure we'll cross paths again soon.
Absolutely, Jaden. Hey, man, you take it easy. And like I say, when you get over this way, let me know so we can meet up somewhere.
Sure do, mate. Thank you very much.
Buddy. Take it easy. Talk to you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Alaman left and weave the ring. Who can it be now?